All right, get comfortable and enjoy.
Nero Wolfe and the 40-Year Debt. On Sunday afternoon, I was flat on the couch with the Times Magazine section, and Wolfe was standing 15 feet from the corkboard, throwing poker darts and calling them spears. I read him a piece about an English marquis named de Clivers, an ornate bird with medals and a smile that could have been insured, until one of Wolfe's spears slid along the rug and stopped at my shoe. I left it there. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, and at exactly 4 he went upstairs to the orchids, leaving me alone with the marquis. The name stayed in my head because it had that special quality that makes it feel as if it's already on a list somewhere. And it turned out it was. Monday, October 7th, I had 2 engagements. One at 3:30 with Anthony D. Perry, president of Seaboard Products and director of Metropolitan Trust, which meant he owned the kind of confidence that comes with other people's money. The other, at 6 o'clock, arranged over the phone by a woman whose voice was cool and clipped, as if she had been trained not to let vowels get emotional. She hadn't given her name, but she had promised she would bring it with her, along with a man arriving that morning from far away. Perry showed up on the minute, because men like him collect punctuality the way they collect stock certificates. He had a grey hat, a stick he didn't need, and a face that could smile without moving any muscles. Wolfe received him at his desk with a mug of beer at his elbow, and I sat in my chair with my notebook. Perry said he wanted confidentiality, and he wanted justice without noise. On the 32nd floor of the Seaboard building, in the office of one of his executives, there had been $30,000 in cash in a desk drawer. On Friday afternoon, the money vanished. Circumstances pointed to a young woman employee named Clara Fox. Perry said he did not believe she was guilty, and he wanted the truth discovered quietly and reported to him personally. Wolfe made him put it into plain language. Wolfe never lets a client hide behind phrasing. "You are asking me," Wolfe said, "to determine who took the money." "And to do it discreetly," Perry insisted. "You are also asking me to protect your corporation from embarrassment." "I'm asking you to prevent an injustice." Wolfe's eyelids drifted down and up again, which for him is close to laughter. "I do not prevent injustices," he said. "I occasionally expose them, that is all. My fee will be—" He named it. Perry tried to bargain because that is what men like Perry do even when bargaining is an insult, and Wolfe stared at him as if he had suggested cutting down the orchids to save on water. Perry surrendered. They always do, sooner or later, if they need Wolfe badly enough. Once Wolfe had him committed, he let me extract details. The money had been in the desk of Ramsay Muir, one of Seaboard's executives. The drawer had not been locked. Muir was wealthy, and apparently thought thieves respected wealth. The office suite was busy. Access to that desk, in theory, belonged to a small group. The suspicion had settled on Clara Fox because she worked in the unit and could have approached the desk without drawing attention. Her salary was $3,600 a year. No expensive tastes, no sudden display of cash. Perry spoke as if he were being reasonable, but I could hear the other thing underneath. He was frightened of a scandal and irritated that he had to be frightened. Then he tried to run my life. "I want you there now," he said, leaning forward. "Go to the Seaboard building immediately and begin. Cancel whatever else you have. This is urgent." "I have another appointment," I told him. 6 o'clock. "Cancel it." "No." His eyes hardened. "I insist on seeing Wolfe." That was when the office door opened. Fritz had come in walking like a butler, and 2 steps behind him was a tall man moving so softly that for an instant Fritz didn't seem to realize he was being shadowed. He was around 6'3", in a blue serge suit with sleeves a shade too short, and he carried a light-colored cowboy hat as if it were a polite weapon. His face looked as if it had been wind-dried for 50 years. His eyes were pale and calm. "My name's Harlan Scoville," he said in a smooth, low voice. He stared at Perry, then at me, then at Perry again, as if comparing him to a mental picture. Perry looked annoyed, because Perry is annoyed by anything that enters a room without being scheduled. Scoville asked, "Are you Mr. Nero Wolfe?" I stepped in. "Mr. Wolfe is not available. I'm his assistant, Archie Goodwin. I'm engaged with this gentleman." Scoville nodded, then looked again at Perry. "Then who's that?" "That," I said, "is none of your business." Scoville shifted his hat. "What do I do now? Sit down and hang my hat on my ear?" I pointed at the leather chair. "Try sitting down first." He sat, but he didn't soften. His eyes stayed alert, not rude, just watchful. I went upstairs to the plant rooms on the roof, where Wolfe was among the orchids, fat and serene, with the look of a man who expects the universe to obey his schedule. I reported that Perry wanted me in his office immediately, and that Perry had demanded to see Wolfe. Wolfe's gaze did not move. "If your pencil fell to the floor," he asked, "would you require my counsel to retrieve it?" "He says it's urgent," I said. "He says I'm outrageous. He says he's an old client. He is probably correct in all respects, particularly the second." Wolfe waved me away. "Leave me." I mentioned Scoville, his appearance, his manner, his insistence on seeing Wolfe. Wolfe gave me a look that reminded me who signed the checks and who could stop signing them. "Manage it," he said. When I returned downstairs, Perry was on his feet, hat and stick in hand, ready to depart in outrage, if outrage could be made to look dignified. "It will have to be tomorrow," I told him. 9 o'clock. I'll start then." Perry's jaw worked. He disliked being told no, almost as much as he disliked being ignored. "All right," he snapped. 9. Come to my office." He left, carrying his urgency with him. Scoville remained. He sat with the cowboy hat on his knees and studied me as if I were a fence he might decide to climb. "I came to see Nero Wolfe," he said. 6 o'clock is his office hour, I told him, and it's already booked. He didn't like that. He asked whether Wolfe was straight. "As straight as a steel bar," I said, "if it's a good bar." Scoville asked who the man in the office had been. "A client. That all?" "That's all you're getting." The telephone rang. A woman's voice asked me to hold the line. Then Perry came on, sharper than before. "Something's changed," he said. "Come here now, immediately." I could have told him no, but that would have turned the whole thing into a contest of wills, and Wolfe had already made it clear he was not entering the ring. I said I would come. Scoville rose slightly, as if he meant to speak, but I was already at the door. I walked to the Seaboard building. On the 32nd floor, a receptionist pointed me to Perry's office with the tight politeness of a person who had been warned not to say anything that might later appear in a deposition. Perry had assembled his little tribunal. He sat behind the desk. Ramsay Muir was there, smooth, expensive, with the look of a man who expects the world to return whatever he misplaces. There was a woman secretary, Miss Barish, with red eyes and a handkerchief in her fist. And Clara Fox sat in a chair by the window, where daylight made her face look more like a witness than a suspect. Perry introduced them quickly, as if names were obstacles. I asked basic questions. Who had access? Who had been in and out on Friday? Why the money had been there at all? Why it had been left unlocked? Why suspicion had settled on Fox? The answers were cautious and thin. Perry wanted discretion. Muir wanted an offender. Miss Barish wanted someone to tell her what she should feel. Clara Fox spoke little. When she did not plead. She answered as if she understood that pleading only invites contempt. I watched her hands. They were still. That did not prove innocence, but it suggested control, and control is rarely the companion of panic. Perry pressed me again to begin at once, to go through the offices, to question the staff, to do it his way, fast, contained, with the result delivered neatly into his palm. I refused. 9 tomorrow, I said. That's when I start. He didn't like it, but he swallowed it. Men like Perry swallow things the way they swallow losses, with a tight face and a private plan to recover later. I went back to West 35th Street. At 6, Wolfe descended to his desk as he always did, as if time had been invented to serve him. Scoville was still there, waiting. Wolfe glanced at him and said, "Sit down," with the tone of a man granting permission to exist. Before Scoville could begin, the doorbell rang. Fritz admitted a man and 2 women. I barely noticed the man because the first woman was Clara Fox, and the moment she spoke, I recognized the voice from the telephone. The cool, controlled voice that had promised a name and a traveler from far away. She apologized for being late and introduced her companions, Hilda Lindquist and Michael Walsh. Clara explained why. The man arriving from far away, the one she had mentioned on the phone, was Harlan Scoville. He had flown in that morning. She had met him in the afternoon, arranged to meet him at 5:15 at his hotel and bring him to Wolfe. When she arrived, he was not there. She had waited, asked questions, run into Lindquist and Walsh, returned, waited again until after 6, and finally decided to come without him. "He could show up any moment," she said, "and he needs to see Mr. Wolfe before we can do anything." Wolfe's eyes stayed on her. He did not hurry her. He never hurries anyone unless he is hungry. Clara said the story was long and started 40 years ago in Silver City, Nevada. Then she made sure Wolfe would listen with more than his ears. "If you help us," she said, "and if we succeed, your fee will be $100,000. Walsh made a sound, half amazement, half relief. Lindquist frowned. Clara ignored both reactions, as if she had already decided who mattered. She held a letter in her hand, ready to begin, when the doorbell rang again. Fritz came in, and I could tell by the set of his mouth that the visitor was a policeman. Wolfe gave a single nod. I ushered Clara Fox, Walsh, and Lindquist into the front room and closed the door. Then I returned to the office to face the interruption. It was Slim Foltz from Homicide, in civilian clothes. He sat, took a piece of paper from his pocket, and told us there had been a man shot a few blocks away, 5 bullets. In the dead man's pocket, they had found a list of names and an address. Wolfe asked, "The dead man's name?" "Harlan Scoville," Foltz said. "Wyoming hunting license." I felt the room shift. Wolfe's face did not change, but his eyes became a shade more intent, like a man who has heard a wrong note. I told Foltz Scoville had been in our office earlier that day and left at 5:26. Fritz confirmed the time, because in Wolfe's house minutes become evidence. Foltz read the other names on the paper. Clara Fox, Michael Walsh, misspelled, Hilda Lindquist, and for no reason I could see yet, the Marquis de Clivers. Foltz said Scoville had been shot at 5:35 on 31st Street, 4 blocks away, 9 minutes after leaving our door. The shots had been fired from a passing car. Quick, clean, anonymous. Foltz left. When the door closed behind him, Wolfe sat absolutely still at his desk, as if movement might invite chaos. Behind the locked door in the front room, 3 people waited with a 40-year story, and now that story had produced a corpse within 9 minutes of walking out of Wolfe's office. I took the key in my hand and went to open the door. I unlocked the door to the front room, and the stale dimness spilled out. Fritz hadn't turned on the lamps. Hilda Lindquist sat stiffly on the sofa, hands folded as if she had been warned not to touch anything. Mike Walsh was in a chair, blinking at me with the slow resentment of a man who has been kept waiting without compensation. "Mr. Wolfe would like to speak to Miss Fox," I said. Walsh said, "I'm hungry." Clara Fox said, "So are we all." "First, just you," I told her. "Food will appear. It always does." She hesitated, then stood and came with me. When I shut the door behind us and led her into Wolfe's office, she took the chair Foltz had used and sat down as if she meant to stay upright through whatever came. Wolfe had refilled his glass and had his elbows on the arms of his chair, looking at her as if she were an item on a menu he hadn't decided to order. "Will you have some beer, Miss Fox?" he asked. "No, thank you." "Very well. First, a simple question. Did you take that money from Mr. Muir's desk?" Her eyes didn't flicker. "We shouldn't let things get confused. Are you acting now as the agent of Seaboard Products?" "I am asking you a question," Wolfe said. "You came here to consult me and offered a fee of $100,000. That suggests you prefer my method. If you do not, You are free to withdraw. Did you take the money? No. Do you know who took it? No. Do you know anything about it? No. Not about the money itself. I have suspicions about the way the accusation has been arranged. Arranged, Wolfe repeated, savouring the word. By whom? She didn't answer that either. She waited, letting him decide whether he meant to push. He pushed, but not where she expected. Did you kill anyone this evening between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock? For the first time, her control cracked. Not into fear, but into contempt. Don't be an idiot. Wolfe didn't move. Did you kill anyone between 5 and 6? No. Did Mr. Walsh or Miss Lindquist do so? She stared at him, then said, in a tone meant to end the subject, No. As a philosopher, you cannot be sure, Wolfe said. As a woman, you are sure. As a woman, she said, and there was a trace of a smile. They didn't. Wolfe nodded once, as if that settled an internal equation. Then he said, Have you a dollar bill? A dollar? Give me one. She looked as if she had walked into the wrong room by mistake, but she opened her handbag, found a bill, and handed it to him. Wolfe unfolded it and passed it to me. Enter it, Archie. Retainer from Miss Clara Fox, and get Mr. Perry on the telephone. Clara's expression went flat. Just like that? Just like that, Wolfe said. You are now my client. With the understanding, I suppose, that I may sever the connection. Without notice, Wolfe agreed. By all means. I dialed Perry's number, fought my way past a receptionist who seemed trained to resist human contact, and finally got him. I nodded to Wolfe and handed him the receiver. Wolfe became velvet. Mr. Perry, this is Nero Wolfe. I have Mr. Goodwin's report. I have also met Miss Clara Fox, and I have accepted her retainer. Yes, sir. She came to me independently. No, I do not see anything unethical. Mr. Perry, you engaged me to discover the truth. I am now in a position where my duty to a client may conflict with your convenience. You may either accept that, or you may terminate our arrangement and pay my fee for services rendered. Perry's voice rose enough for me to hear the shape of it, even without the words. Wolfe cut it off. He hated arguments on the telephone. They wasted time and produced sweat. He ended the call with a polite finality and set the receiver down. There, he said, and turned back to Clara Fox. Now, tell me about your personal relations with Mr. Perry and Mr. Muir. Her hands tightened on the strap of her handbag. That's not what I came here for. It is relevant, Wolfe said. It may also be useful. For example, it may help keep you from being arrested in my house. I don't need protection. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. Miss Fox, a man has been shot 5 times within 9 minutes of leaving this house. His pocket contained your name and mine. That is not a favorable omen. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away as if choosing what to concede. Mr. Muir has been persistent, she said at last. For months. He has insisted on seeing me outside business hours. He has made suggestions. When I refused, he became offended. When he is offended, he becomes vindictive. And Mr. Perry? Mr. Perry doesn't like trouble. He doesn't like scandal. He likes solutions. Wolfe nodded. Now we may proceed to what you came for. Bring the others. I went to the front room and opened the door. Walsh was halfway out of his chair before I spoke. You'll get fed, I told him. Come in. They followed me into Wolfe's office. Walsh with the restless impatience of a man who wants answers and dinner in that order. Lindquist with a tight mouth and a wary eye, as if she suspected the furniture of recording devices. Wolfe looked at all 3 of them and said, In heaven's name, are you camels or bears preparing for winter? Fritz will serve supper in 5 minutes. You will eat, then we will work. Clara started to protest, but Wolfe's tone had the weight of a closed door. She gave a small nod and went with Lindquist and Walsh toward the dining room. Wolfe did not talk business at table. That was one of his laws, as firm as his orchid schedule. We ate. Fritz served. Walsh chewed as if he meant to punish the food for delay. Lindquist ate carefully, as if every bite had to be approved by a committee. Clara Fox ate little. Afterward, coffee. Then Wolfe, having satisfied his appetite, permitted himself to satisfy his curiosity. We returned to the office. Clara sat again, took a folded paper from her bag, and laid it on her lap. "This is where it begins," she said. "Not with me, with my mother. I didn't know about it until 7 years ago, until after she died." Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Your mother is dead." "Yes. My father was killed in France during the war. I don't remember him, but he wrote this letter to my mother. She received it late. She put it away. I never read it until she died." "And you have brought me a copy," Wolfe said. "The original is put away," she replied. "This is typed, and it isn't complete. Just the part that matters." Wolfe made a small gesture. "Read." Clara unfolded the paper and began. The letter was addressed to a woman named Lola, and the voice in it was a man's, plain, direct, slightly amused at his own past, and not at all ashamed of it. It spoke of Nevada, Silver City, 40 years earlier, when a handful of young men drifted together because drifting was what they did. It spoke of a kid named Rubber Coleman, called Rubber, because he bounced back up when he got knocked down. It spoke of a joke that became a name, the Rubber Band. Then it got to blood. "One of the gang," Clara read, "a kid named George Rowley, shot a man and killed him." The letter described what followed in the way men describe a thing they can't undo, not with melodrama, but with a blunt sequence of facts. Rowley had shot the man in a saloon quarrel. Silver City, full of men with guns and opinions, decided to handle it quickly. 24 hours later they meant to hang him. Rowley, lacking sense, hadn't made a clean getaway. The letter said Rubber Coleman wouldn't have it. Rubber Band, or something like it, had a kind of loyalty that substituted for morality. They decided to rescue Rowley. A horse was obtained, bought, borrowed, or stolen. The letter didn't pretend to care. A palomino with a white face. They saddled it and slipped out past shacks and tents, moving along a gully to where the mob had gathered. They rescued George Rowley, all right. The letter described the confusion. Someone starting a fire, flames running through dry boards and canvas, men shouting, the crowd turning into a panic stampede. It mentioned Mike Walsh by name. Walsh, as a young man, reputed to be a dead shot, emptying 2 guns without hitting anyone. It mentioned Vic Lindquist. It mentioned Rubber Coleman, laughing as if the whole town were a stage set built for his convenience. Rowley got into the saddle and away before anyone else understood what was happening. The mob didn't chase him because they were too busy stamping out fire and rage. Clara read on, voice steady. The letter added details the way old men add details when they talk about the only part of their youth that still feels real. The horse, the gully, the stink of smoke, the way a whole town can be made foolish with a match. Then the letter shifted briefly to consequences. How the story came out later, how their chief offense ended up being the fire, how there were other incidents, other troubles, things that would take a year to tell. It ended, in the excerpt Clara had, with the writer naming himself Gilbert Fox, she read. The writer of these presents. She stopped, stared at the last line as if she expected it to change, then folded the paper with care and returned it to her handbag. Wolfe watched her in silence. Then he said, "So, your father was Gilbert Fox?" "Yes." "And he was in the Rubber Band?" "He says so." Wolfe's gaze moved to Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, were you in Silver City, Nevada 40 years ago?" Walsh's face had gone a dull red. "I was." "And Vic Lindquist?" "He was there," Walsh said, and glanced at Hilda as if apologizing for dragging her into it. "He's dead." Hilda Lindquist's mouth tightened. "My father is dead," she said, as if stating it could keep it from being used. Wolfe turned back to Clara. "And Mr. Scoville?" Clara's fingers tightened again. "Mr. Scoville had notes. He took them. He said he'd put everything down, the way he remembered it. I told you. If you refused, his notes would be given to me." Wolfe's expression didn't change, but the air in the room did. A dead man's notes had a way of becoming someone else's property. "And now," Wolfe said softly, "Mr. Scoville is dead, and his pocket contained a list of names." "Yes. Why?" Wolfe asked. "Why did he come to New York? Why did you bring him here? What is this to you?" Clara lifted her chin. "Because something from that time is alive again. Because a man who shouldn't matter anymore matters now. Because a fortune is involved, and a name and proof. And because someone is willing to kill to prevent it." Wolfe sat absolutely still, absorbing that without giving her the satisfaction of seeing any reaction. "Names," he said. "I like names. Provide them." Clara took a breath. "Not yet. Not until you agree to act." Wolfe's lips curled almost. "Miss Fox, I have already acted. I accepted your retainer. I spoke to Mr. Perry. I am now implicated whether I wish it or not. You may proceed." She hesitated, measuring him. Then she said, "There are things I can't say in the open. Not yet." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Do you believe the police are about to arrest you for the seaboard theft?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I suspect they may try. Mr. Muir is capable of arranging it." Wolfe nodded once, decision made. "Where do you live?" "I have a small flat on East 61st Street. "And other places?" Wolfe pressed. "A trunk in storage? A cottage? A friend's closet?" "No, nothing." "You have an automobile?" "A small car. It's in a garage on 60th Street." Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, what two can you get here at once?" I glanced at the clock. "Saul Panzer in 10 minutes. Fred Durkin in 20. Ori Cather in half an hour." "Get them," Wolfe said. "Miss Fox will give you the key to her apartment and the garage claim check. Mr. Panzer will search the apartment. Mr. Cather will attend to the automobile and drive it to our garage. Mr. Durkin will remain outside and observe, and you, Archie, will stop pacing and do something useful." Clara Fox opened her handbag, found a key, and set it on Wolfe's desk without drama. Then she produced the garage slip and did the same. Wolfe looked at the key and the slip as if they were chess pieces. "Good," he said. "Now we may begin to discover what has been arranged, and by whom." I went for the telephone. Dinner at our house has a way of pretending the world can't intrude. Fritz brings the soup, Wolfe tastes it, and for a little while you could believe that men aren't being shot on 31st Street and that names aren't being written down for somebody to die over. That Monday, the world intruded twice anyway. Saul Panzer showed up before I'd finished my first plate. Fritz had barely set the roast on the sideboard when the bell rang and Saul came in, neat and narrow as a hatpin, hat in hand, eyes doing their quiet counting. He didn't head for the office. He headed for the dining room doorway and waited there until Wolfe noticed him, because Saul knows rules and uses them like tools. Wolfe didn't like it. His eyelids lowered a fraction, the kind of look he gives a fly that has landed on the sugar. "Well?" he asked. Saul's voice was low, respectful, and quick. "I went to Miss Fox's apartment as instructed. There's been company." "What sort of company?" Wolfe said. "The kind that doesn't knock. The kind that knows how to be invisible and still be there." Wolfe's fingers paused with the fork. He didn't ask Saul to elaborate. He didn't have to. If somebody had been through Clara Fox's place, it wasn't to admire the wallpaper. Wolfe nodded once. "Very good. Eat." Saul didn't move. "I did not come for nourishment. I came because you may want eyes outside." Wolfe's gaze didn't flicker to me. It held Saul. "You will have coffee in the kitchen," he said, "and you will wait." Saul disappeared as smoothly as he had arrived, and the roast cooled while Walsh glowered at his plate as if the beef was personally responsible for murder and delay. Walsh had been changing colours all evening. When we first sat down, he was the shade of a man trying to look agreeable. By the time Saul came and went, he had gone through red and pale and landed on a dull purple that didn't flatter him. Hilda Lindquist ate as if she was trying to take up as little space as possible. She had a square jaw and a farm woman's sturdiness. but she held herself tight, as if sturdiness could be cracked by what she'd already heard. Clara Fox ate very little. She sipped coffee, as if it was something she'd promised herself she would finish. Wolfe played host. He made a few remarks that were almost pleasant. He refilled Walsh's glass once and watched him as a zoologist watches an animal that might bolt. Walsh drank too fast. Lindquist drank hardly at all. Clara Fox drank nothing but coffee. The second intrusion came after dinner, while I was still chewing the last of my bread. The bell rang again, and Fritz went down the hall, and when he came back, he didn't look pleased. "It is Mr. Durkin, sir," he announced. That meant trouble. "Fred Durkin is not a man you invite to a dinner party unless you want your guests to choke." I went out and met Fred in the hall. He was big, honest-looking, and apologetic by nature. That night he looked more apologetic than usual. "Sorry, Archie," he muttered. "I brought news." In the office, Wolfe listened to him with the patience of a man who would rather be listening to silence. "Ori Cather has acquired Miss Fox's automobile," Fred reported. "It is now in our garage, but there is a tail." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "A tail on whom?" "On the car," Fred said. "On the whole thing. Ori ran into a man who asked questions the way a cop asks questions when he already knows the answers. When Ori told him the car was staying put for the present, the man watched him telephone. Then he crossed the street and stayed there, pretending to be nothing." Wolfe didn't like after-dinner irritants. His voice got thin. "So the gentleman is outside now?" "Yes, sir, across the street." Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, does this amuse you?" "No," I said. "It should not. The implication is obvious." He turned his eyes back to Clara Fox, and this time he let her see he was looking at her. "Well," Wolfe said, "we were too late." Clara lifted her brows. "Too late for what?" "To keep you out of jail," Wolfe said. "If the police are showing interest in your automobile and in my house, it is because they have found what they wanted to find." "Found what?" Walsh snapped. Wolfe ignored him. "The money, or something they can call the money, something that points conveniently in one direction." Clara's mouth tightened. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the look of a woman watching a trap close and calculating whether her fingers are still inside it. "You said you could help," she said. "I can," Wolfe replied, "but I cannot reverse time. We will attend to that little problem later. Now you will do what you came here to do. Tell me about George Rowley." She stared at him, as if her mind had been on another road and he had yanked the wheel. Then she nodded once, as if deciding there was no point in holding back. "We found him," she said. Walsh made a sound in his throat. Lindquist's hands tightened in her lap. Clara spoke steadily, with the calm she used like armor. "I began looking long ago," she said. "Not because I wanted romance. Because my mother died with a question she never answered. She had my father's letter, the one I read after she died. She had names. She had Nevada in her head like a dream she couldn't wake from. And she had one belief, that something was owed." Wolfe watched her without moving. His stillness is not a kindness. It's a net. "How did you find him?" he asked. "By chance," Clara said. "By stubbornness. By asking the wrong people until I found the right one. There was a night, about a year ago, when I was still telling myself it was impossible. I went to a club, not because I wanted to, but because it was where a certain name had been seen. I looked across the room and I saw him." Wolfe nodded slowly, as if the picture satisfied him. "That would be the Marquis of Clivers," he said. Clara's head jerked. "How do you know that?" "Not by divination," Wolfe said. "It does not matter. Proceed." Walsh leaned forward, unable to hold it. "You mean him? The Englishman? The one in the papers?" Clara glanced at him. "Yes." Lindquist's voice was low and hard. "That's crazy." "It's true," Clara said. "The name he uses now is a title. The man underneath it is older and meaner and richer than any title. He came to New York on a diplomatic mission. He is watched. He is protected. And he is the same man my father wrote about. George Rowley. Wolfe's gaze didn't flicker. And you approached him. I didn't come running with my hat in my hands, Clara said. I used a name from the letter. I watched his face when he heard it. I watched his eyes. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. He only tried to make it manageable. Wolfe made a small sound. Manageable. A useful word. He was going to Washington, Clara continued. He said he feared adventuresses. He said it like a joke, but he meant it. He offered money to make things go away. A sum that would have sounded enormous to my mother and insulting to me. Walsh's fist clenched on the chair arm. How much? Clara didn't look at him. Enough to show he believed me. Wolfe's voice stayed even. And you declined? I said I wanted terms, Clara replied. Not charity, not hush money. Something formal, something that would hold him. Wolfe wiggled a finger at her. But what made you think you needed me? I detect no lack of confidence in your operations to date. Clara's mouth tightened into something like a smile. Because there are lawyers, Mr. Wolfe, and there are men who make lawyers look like choir boys. I wanted someone who could see through both kinds. I am not a lawyer, Wolfe said. I know, Clara replied. That's why I came. Wolfe didn't reward her with approval. He merely nodded, as if placing a new piece on a board. And Mr. Scoville? He asked. Where did he enter your little drama? Clara exhaled. He had been there, she said. In Nevada. He knew names. He knew how people behave when they're scared and greedy. He had notes, his own. He wanted to put everything in writing. Walsh blurted. He was supposed to meet us. I know, Clara snapped. I tried. Wolfe lifted a hand. You saw him write the names on that paper? Yes, Clara said. At lunch. He wrote them while he talked. He said he liked to keep things straight. Then he came here in the afternoon to see you, and he was killed on the street 9 minutes later. The room sat with that for a moment. Even Walsh stopped moving. Hilda Lindquist spoke suddenly, her voice sharp with resentment and fear. I didn't want to come here, she said. I told Mike it was foolish. But we're broke. The farm it's hanging by a thread. He said maybe we could get enough to save it. Wolfe inclined his head, as if acknowledging the existence of fields and weather. And now, of course. Now I'm glad I came, Hilda cut in. Because I've often heard of you. And if someone can shoot a man down on the street, he can shoot the rest of us, if he thinks he has to. Walsh looked at her, then at Clara, then at Wolfe. Who shot him? He demanded. Don't tell me it was the Marquis. I have not said the Marquis shot him, Wolfe replied mildly. Who else did? Hilda challenged. Wolfe let the question hang, then said, I cannot tell you. Not yet. Walsh's hands worked, restless. Then what do we do? Sit here and wait our turn? Wolfe's eyes shifted to Saul Panzer, who had reappeared in the doorway like a thought Wolfe had summoned. Saul, Wolfe said, Miss Lindquist would like to be in seclusion. She believes she may be in danger. Saul nodded once, expression unreadable. I can manage that. Wolfe said, There is no warrant yet. Saul's gaze flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. Do you want the address known? By no means, Wolfe said. If I need to communicate, I can do so through you. Miss Lindquist may telephone me and say which branch of Western Union will accept her message. General delivery. Hilda stood, face set stubbornly, as if she meant to stand up to whatever came next. Clara rose with her and touched her arm. Good night, Hilda, Clara said. It's rotten, but keep your chin up. Hilda swallowed and said loudly, as if to prove she wasn't going to be reduced to whispering, Good night, everybody. Saul moved her toward the hall. Wolfe's gaze slid to Walsh. Now, sir, your turn. Walsh stiffened. My turn for what? For counsel, Wolfe said. You are impulsive. That is your symptom. If you wish to remain alive, I would suggest you do as you are told. Mr. Panzer is worthy of your trust and mine. If you wish him to assist you. Walsh exploded. "Assist me? I don't need a babysitter. I need to see Rowley. I need to see the Marquis. I need—" Wolfe's voice snapped, sharp as a slap. "You need to be quiet." Walsh shut his mouth. His nostrils flared. Then, grudgingly, he nodded. Wolfe's tone softened back to control. "You will leave your hotel. You will not go anywhere alone. You will not telephone anyone without informing me. If you cannot accept that, you may leave at once, and you may also write your name on a piece of paper for the convenience of the man in the passing car." Walsh stared at Wolfe, then at me. His anger seemed to drain into something that looked like sense. "All right," he muttered. "All right, damn it." Clara Fox said quietly, "Mike." He waved her off. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted certainty, and there wasn't any. Wolfe turned to Clara. "And you, Miss Fox, will remain in this house." Her eyes flashed. "I won't be hidden." "You will be sheltered," Wolfe corrected. "There is a difference. Mr. Kramer may be an honest man, but he has a badge and a temper, and if he decides to arrest you because it is convenient, he will not pause to admire my objections." Clara's chin lifted. "Are you making me your prisoner?" "Bosh," Wolfe said. "I am making you my client." He pressed the button. Fritz appeared. "Fritz, show Miss Fox a room. Ensure she has what she requires. And if she asks for anything foolish, consult me." Clara stood still for a moment, eyes on Wolfe, then nodded and followed Fritz out. I should have been more careful after that. I wasn't. 2 minutes later, I went to the hall for air and found a sergeant on my doorstep with 2 uniforms behind him and the look of a man who thinks doors exist to be opened. He grunted. "We're going in after Clara Fox. Open up." I lifted my brows. "In here? You're crazy." "Maybe we're crazy," he said. "Open the door." I lit a cigarette with the calm of a man who has all evening to get arrested. "It just happens we don't want company of any kind at present." He glared. "Is Clara Fox in there?" "Either she is, and I don't want you to know it," I said pleasantly. "Or she's not, and I don't want you to go looking. Which answer would you like?" One of the uniforms piped up, eager. "Take him down for resisting an officer." I looked at him with pity. "You'll retire rich if you keep talking like that." The sergeant reached into his pocket and produced a folded paper. I saw names. I saw the shape of authority. Then the elevator door opened down the hall and Inspector Kramer appeared, cigar in his mouth, hat pushed back, eyes already tired of everyone. "All right," Kramer growled. "Which one of you geniuses is trying to start a lawsuit?" He jerked his head at the sergeant, then at me. "Inside!" I stepped back. Kramer came in, and the uniforms stayed outside, disappointed. In the office, Wolfe received him with the bland calm of a man greeting weather. Kramer did not waste time. He talked about the Marquis of Clivers in the tone cops use when they're forced to talk about diplomats. Half contempt, half caution. He talked about protection, about public appearances, about men assigned to watch, about how everybody in the city had gone a little nuts since the Marquis arrived. He talked about Scoville's murder and the paper in his pocket. Wolfe listened, fingers twined, and said, "I know. Mr. Foltz showed me the list." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Then you know why I'm here." Wolfe's voice stayed mild. "You are here because someone has decided Miss Fox is convenient." Kramer's jaw worked around his cigar. "I'm here because she's mixed up in it, Wolfe. She's mixed up in a theft at Seaboard, and now she's mixed up in a homicide with a foreign big shot floating around the edges. I don't like the looks of it." Wolfe said, "Nor do I." Kramer leaned forward. "Where is she?" "In my house," Wolfe said, "and under my protection." Kramer stared at him. For a moment I thought he might try to bulldoze Wolfe in his own chair, just from habit. Then he grunted. "All right, I'll play for now, but if I want her, I'll take her." "You may try," Wolfe said. "You will fail." Kramer stood, irritated. You make it hard to like you." "It is not my ambition," Wolfe replied. When Kramer had gone and the door had closed and the building felt quiet again, Wolfe sat back and exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath for 10 years. Then he began issuing instructions in that low, steady voice that turns chaos into a schedule. Miss Fox would breakfast with him in his room at 7. No one would open the front door to anyone without my being present. Fred Durkin would remain outside. Saul Panzer would report by telephone. Walsh would be kept close. Fritz would be Fritz. By the time Wolfe finished, it was past midnight, and I had the bleak thought that I might have to go to jail on an empty stomach after all. But I didn't, not that night. I typed Wolfe's procedure, made copies the way he liked, and finally went upstairs, listening to the building's sounds as if they were footsteps. Somewhere in the house, Clara Fox was awake in a guest room, staring into darkness with the knowledge that a man had died 9 minutes after leaving our door. I got into bed and told myself I would sleep. I didn't believe it. When Kramer finally left, the house did not relax. It only changed its posture. The street noises came through the front windows like an accusation. Cars hissing past on wet pavement, a voice too loud at the corner, the faint clink of bottles from somewhere below. Wolfe sat behind his desk with his fingers interlaced, as if he were holding the whole night between his hands to keep it from spilling. Clara Fox stood near the chair she'd been using, not sitting, not pacing, just poised. Hilda Lindquist watched her with a hard, worried gaze. Mike Walsh kept shifting his weight as if the room were a train platform and he'd missed the last one. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie!" "Yes?" "You will stop looking injured. You were not arrested." "Yet," I said. "That is an unworthy ambition. Bring me beer." Fritz had barely turned toward the kitchen when the doorbell rang again. For one instant, all 3 of them froze, as if the bell were a pistol shot. Fritz opened the door with care, and Saul Panzer stepped in, hat in hand, eyes moving. Under his arm, he carried a long cardboard box. Saul is small, narrow, and precise. He doesn't carry boxes unless he believes the box might contain trouble, profit, or both. He came straight to the office, slid past the chairs, and set the box on Wolfe's desk. "Good evening, Mr. Wolfe," he said. "Good evening, Saul. You telephoned?" "Yes. I told Archie I'd been to Miss Fox's apartment. There was a man in the street who thought he was following me. I made sure he wasn't." Saul nodded at the box. "And this was there. A florist delivery, addressed to Miss Fox. It's possible what you want was in it, so I brought it." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. He didn't like unexpected packages. He liked even less the idea that someone was using flowers as a vehicle. "May we open it, Miss Fox?" he asked. "Certainly." Saul and I peeled off the heavy grey tape. The lid came up, and the room filled with an odour so thick you could almost see it. Inside was 1,000 roses. For a second, even Walsh forgot to fidget. Hilda Lindquist leaned forward involuntarily, then checked herself as if beauty were a betrayal. I reached in and pulled out the card. The handwriting was ragged, scrawly, as if the writer had learned penmanship from a shovel. I read the name out loud. Francis Horrocks. Clara's face changed, not into surprise, but into recognition, sharpened by irritation. "That's my acquaintance," she said. "The man who threw me out of his office." Walsh blinked. "Why would he send you roses?" Clara didn't answer him. She lifted a rose and held it near her face, as if testing whether it was real, then set it down again with a small, decisive movement. Wolfe rubbed his nose, which had been tickled by the scent. "Saul," he said, "remove them from this room. They offend me." Saul took the box as if it were a coffin and carried it out. Wolfe's eyes moved to Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, wake yourself." Walsh's head had dipped. He jerked it up, irritated. "I'm awake." "You told us," Wolfe said, "that you recognized the Marquis of Clivers." "I did." "I wish to be certain. Did you recognize him as George Rowley?" Walsh's jaw worked. "Sure I did. Who says I didn't?" "As yet, no one," Wolfe said. "Are you positive?" Walsh snorted. I'm always positive. So you were pleased to inform us? Very well. Wolfe's gaze hardened a fraction. Do you happen to have your gun with you? Walsh's hand twitched toward his hip. I've got a license. Of course. May I see it? As a favor. Walsh growled something under his breath. But after a moment, he drew it out, carefully, like a man showing a prized tool, and offered it across. Wolfe didn't touch it. He nodded to me. I took it, checked the make, the condition, the weight. It was well cared for. Walsh watched my hands like a father watching a stranger hold his child. When I handed it back, Walsh slid it away with an almost tender movement. Clara Fox said sharply, Who's wasting time now, Mr. Wolfe? You still haven't told us what you intend to do. Wolfe stopped her with a small gesture. Do not begin again, Miss Fox. I am thinking. You said you would act. I am acting, Wolfe said, but I refuse to do it in a stampede. He looked at all three of them. We will be plain. You are here for money. Hilda Lindquist stiffened. Not for money, Wolfe repeated. Whatever moral varnish you apply, the substance remains. You believe the Marquis of Clivers is George Rowley, and you believe he owes your family a debt from 40 years ago. You wish to collect. It isn't blackmail, Clara said coolly. It isn't blackmail to try to collect something a man promised to pay. Wolfe nodded once. A nice point. Morally, he owes it. But where morally, he may refuse. Therefore, your interest is not enough. Before that comes the question, who is going to prevent you from collecting? And why? Walsh leaned forward. Who? Wolfe lifted one finger. One thing at a time. First, procedure. He leaned back and spoke as if he were dictating to a stenographer. I will write a letter to the Marquis of Clivers. It will be signed by me. It will state that I have been engaged by Victor Lindquist and his daughter, and by Mr. Michael Walsh, and by Miss Clara Fox, in the matter of a debt incurred in Silver City, Nevada. It will demand a conference. It will offer him a chance to settle privately, without publicity and without recourse to court. Hilda's eyes narrowed. He won't come. He may, Wolfe said. He has already shown interest by sending Mr. Horrocks to eject Miss Fox, and then to send her 1,000 roses. Clara's lips tightened. He didn't send Horrocks. Horrocks is his man. He did what he was told. Exactly, Wolfe said, and someone has now taken a further step. Walsh frowned. What further step? Wolfe's half-closed eyes took in their faces. At 5:35 this evening, on West 31st Street near 10th Avenue, Harlan Scoville was shot and killed. They all stared at him as if he had struck the desk. Walsh's mouth fell open. Hilda made a small sound that could have been a prayer or a curse. Clara didn't move at all, but her hands tightened around her handbag strap until the leather creaked. Wolfe went on with the calm cruelty of a man delivering weather. He was walking along the sidewalk. Someone in a passing automobile fired 5 shots. The automobile has since been found, empty, on 9th Avenue. Walsh lurched up, half out of his chair. To hell with this! Sit, Wolfe said quietly. Walsh sat. He looked suddenly smaller, as if the murder had taken the padding out of him. Clara's voice was very controlled. Why are you telling us this now? We already... I am telling you, Wolfe said, because it is now one of your 3 problems. 3? Hilda whispered. 3, Wolfe said. First, your claim upon the Marquis of Clivers. Second, Miss Fox's difficulty with the Seaboard Products Corporation and Mr. Muir's missing money. Third, your joint peril resulting from the murder of Harlan Scoville. Walsh's eyes narrowed. Joint peril? Wolfe nodded. Our names, mine and yours, were found on a paper in Scoville's pocket. Mr. Foltz of Homicide brought it here. I allowed him to depart without mentioning that the persons named were presently under my roof. Clara stared at him. You didn't tell them? Certainly not, Wolfe said. I prefer not to invite the police into my house unless I have to. Hilda Lindquist spoke abruptly. The Marquis of Clivers knew Scoville was coming here. "How do you know?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know," she snapped. "I see it. Clara went to his man. The Marquis knew she was coming to you. Scoville could have told him, or Horrocks could have guessed, or dash dash." "Possible," Wolfe admitted. "If you substitute possible for certain in your mind, you may live longer." Walsh muttered, "To hell with the cops." Clara's gaze went to the floor, then back to Wolfe. "What do you think the murderer wanted?" Wolfe's eyes did not soften. "Profit." Clara's fingers tightened. "Profit?" "Obviously," Wolfe said. "If Scoville was killed by someone connected with your Silver City matter, and I consider that likely, the murderer had two ends in view: to remove Scoville as an active element and to frighten or paralyze the rest of you. Murder can be a sound investment." Clara's face went paler. "Then don't send your letter." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Indeed, you ask me to retreat at the first blow." "I'm asking you to be intelligent," she said. "You write to him, you challenge him, and we'll be corpses before morning." Wolfe looked at her as if she were arguing with arithmetic. "Miss Fox, if we do nothing, you will still be in danger, and you will also remain penniless. I do not engage in inactivity." He turned his head slightly toward me. "Archie, you will type the letter." Clara's voice rose, sharp with anger and fear. "Mr. Wolfe!" "Silence!" Wolfe said, not loud, not dramatic, just final. He dictated. I typed. The letter was brief, firm, and maddeningly polite. It offered the Marquis the chance to settle a legal obligation privately. It named the parties. It demanded a conference at Wolfe's office at a stated hour the next day. It made clear that delay would not be tolerated. When I finished, Wolfe read it once, nodded, and signed. "Have it delivered by special messenger," he said. I went to the telephone. While I arranged the delivery, Wolfe looked at Hilda Lindquist, as if noticing her for the first time, as an individual rather than as part of a claim. "Is there anything of value in your luggage at the hotel, Miss Lindquist?" She blinked. "Not much. No." "Have you any money?" "I have $38 and my ticket home." "Opulence," Wolfe said. "Good night, Miss Lindquist. Sleep well." Hilda stared. "Good night? You mean leave?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "You will not remain in this house." Walsh exploded. "Why her and not me?" Wolfe ignored him. He looked toward the hall. "Saul!" Saul appeared as if he'd been waiting behind the door all along. "You will take Miss Lindquist to seclusion," Wolfe said. "Do not let her address be known. If she must communicate, she may use general delivery or a Western Union office arranged with you." Hilda's jaw tightened. She was the kind of woman who hates being handled, even when handling is meant to save her. Clara went to her and touched her arm. "Good night, Hilda. It's rotten, but keep your chin up." Hilda swallowed and said loudly, as if volume could keep fear from getting inside her, "Good night, everybody." Saul guided her out. Walsh watched them go, then turned back with a violent helplessness in his face. "Now what?" "Now," Wolfe said. "Your turn." Walsh's hands spread. "My turn for what?" "For discipline," Wolfe said. "Your symptom is impulsiveness. If you wish to remain alive, you will take precautions." Walsh stood up suddenly. "I'll take my own precautions." He headed for the door. Wolfe snapped, sharp as a whip. "Get him, Archie!" Remembering the gun on Walsh's hip, I went in carefully and folded myself around him from behind, locking his arms and pinning him before he could decide whether to be offended or violent. He froze, then twisted his head just enough to look at me with a bright, bitter amusement. "It's me now, is it?" he said. Wolfe spoke across the room. "You called me an idiot, Mr. Walsh. You may now demonstrate that you are not one. I strongly advise you to adopt precautions similar to Miss Lindquist's." "I'll do me own precautions," Walsh said. Clara came to him, one hand out. "Mike, don't be stupid." Walsh shook his head. "Did you see him grab me?" And all I was doing was leaving." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Turn him loose, Archie." I loosened. Walsh rubbed his arm as if my grip had insulted him personally, then looked at Wolfe with a hard stare. "But I'm no idiot," he said. "Show me that back way." Clara begged him again. "Don't go." He didn't answer her. I led him through the kitchen and out by the service stair, the route that avoided the front door and anyone across the street who might be watching. Walsh went down fast, like a man who needs motion to keep his fear from speaking. When I returned to the office, Clara was still standing. "Did he really go?" she asked. I nodded. "With bells on?" She turned to Wolfe, chin lifted stubbornly. "I don't want to go away and hide. I don't either. I don't want to run away." "Then it is lucky you won't have to," Wolfe said. "Lucky?" Clara demanded. "How is this lucky?" Wolfe's eyes were tired now, and behind the tiredness was irritation, at the police, at the murder, at the insolence of events that refused to line up neatly. "You will remain in this house," he said. "You will keep to your room, with the curtains drawn. If you must telephone, you will do so through Mr. Goodwin. These measures are intended both for your safety and to preserve me from serious annoyance." Clara stared at him. "You mean I'm a prisoner?" "Bosh," Wolfe said and pushed the button for Fritz. "You are a client." Fritz appeared. Wolfe nodded toward the hall. "Show Miss Fox her room." Clara brushed her hair back, eyes bright in the lamplight. "I don't think I'll sleep." "I hope you will," Wolfe said, "even without appetite for it." Fritz led her away. The office was suddenly quieter, emptier, and it felt wrong, like a stage after the actors have stepped off, but the audience still hasn't gone home. Wolfe looked at me. "If you have any lingering desire to complain," he said, "I suggest you postpone it." I didn't answer. I went to the hall, listening. The house had its night sounds. A faint creak, the distant settling of pipes, Fritz's soft steps. And under those, something else. An awareness that someone out there had already decided that bullets were a reasonable way to manage 40-year-old debts. Tuesday began with Saul Panzer in the hall, hat in hand, looking as if he'd swallowed something sharp. "It's in the car," he said. Wolfe didn't ask what. Clara Fox, standing behind him in a borrowed robe, did. "What is?" Saul answered her, not me. 30,000 in cash, under the rear seat cushion, wrapped and tucked like it was planted in a hurry. Clara's mouth went thin. "So that's the trick." Wolfe's voice was even. "Yes. Mr. Muir's missing money has obligingly appeared where it can be discovered." "By the police," I said. "Precisely," Wolfe replied. "Archie, telephone Inspector Kramer. Offer him the chance to behave intelligently, which he will refuse." Kramer arrived with a warrant and 2 men who looked eager. He wanted Clara. Wolfe gave her to him without theatrics, but he also gave him the location of the money and insisted the automobile remain sealed until Kramer himself looked at it. Kramer took Clara anyway. She walked out with her chin up and her eyes clear, as if she had decided that indignity was not going to be allowed to settle on her like dust. When the door closed, Wolfe sat very still, then said, "Now we proceed." We proceeded toward an evening Wolfe had already built. His letter to the Marquis of Clivers, delivered the night before, had demanded a conference at his office. Wolfe had also demanded witnesses, Inspector Kramer, the district attorney, Skinner, and if the British insisted on escorting their special envoy, the escort could come too. Wolfe wanted no later arguments about what had been said, by whom, and in whose hearing. All day the street outside carried the dull pressure of surveillance. A car too steady in its idling. A man too casual at the corner. Fred Durkin reported it with the resigned tone of a man watching a slow storm. By late afternoon, I learned Clara was still being held, questioned, and not yet charged. It was Kramer's favorite posture, leaning. At 6:30, the telephone rang and a voice exploded into the receiver. "Nero Wolfe! Nero—" "Yes," I snapped. "Talking." "I've got him! Up here! 55th Street! Mike Walsh, I've got him covered! Come up!" The words ended in the crack of a gunshot, so close to the mouthpiece it stung my ear. Then nothing. I called into the deadline until it was clear I was talking to emptiness. I turned to Wolfe. "Walsh?" Wolfe's eyes were shut. His lips moved silently as if he were counting. When he opened them, his voice was quiet. "Yes, and now the second man is gone." "Second?" I said. "Scoville was first," Wolfe replied. "Mr. Walsh has just made himself second. It is an instructive order." I was reaching for my hat when the bell rang. Fritz admitted Anthony Perry, punctual, neat, and wearing his thin, confident smile like a tie. He looked around our office as if measuring it for purchase. "You wanted to see me," he said. Wolfe's tone was almost polite. "Indeed. Sit down, Mr. Perry." Perry sat, but he didn't relax. His eyes kept flicking toward the door, as if he disliked being indoors without knowing the exits. Then the rest arrived, exactly as Wolfe had arranged. Inspector Kramer came in with the district attorney, and with them came Lord Clivers, Marquis de Clivers, composed in evening clothes, face sharp and controlled, a man trained to treat rooms as temporary inconveniences. He brought a heavy-lidded companion named Francis Horrocks, who looked like muscle that had learned to smile slowly. A British official hovered behind them, anxious to keep the whole affair proper. Wolfe let them all stand a moment and feel whose room it was. Then he said, "Gentlemen, we are here for 3 matters: the murder of Harlan Scoville, the murder of Michael Walsh, newly committed, and the framing of Miss Clara Fox for a theft at Seaboard Products." Kramer growled, "Where's Clara?" "In your custody," Wolfe said. "Where you put her after discovering $30,000 in her car." Perry's head jerked. "In her car?" Wolfe didn't answer him yet. He looked at Clivers. "My letter referred to a debt incurred in Silver City, Nevada, 40 years ago. Do you deny you were there?" Clivers' smile was thin. "I deny the relevance." "Do you deny it?" Wolfe repeated. Clivers' eyes hardened, but he did not deny it. He merely said, "This is preposterous." "It is only unpleasant," Wolfe replied. 40 years ago, a man named George Rowley shot another man and was to be hanged. He was rescued by a gang calling itself the Rubber Band. Members included Victor Lindquist, Harlan Scoville, Michael Walsh, and a young man called Rubber Coleman. Skinner snapped, "Where is your proof, Wolfe?" Wolfe gestured to a stack of papers on his desk. "Here, an agreement, signed by those men, and payment orders endorsing proceeds. They will interest you, Mr. Skinner, because they explain motive." He turned his gaze to Perry at last. "Mr. Perry, you came to me about missing money and pleaded for discretion. You were anxious to control my movements. You were anxious to keep Seaboard's embarrassment small and Miss Fox's innocence irrelevant." Perry's smile twitched. "I don't know what game you think you're playing." Wolfe's voice sharpened. "No game. Exposure. You are not merely Anthony D. Perry, respectable executive. You are James N. Coleman, Rubber Coleman, who has spent decades laundering himself into a corporation. You arranged the theft at Seaboard and planted the money in Miss Fox's car. You killed Scoville and Walsh because they carried knowledge that could be used against you, and you intended to destroy Lord Clivers with scandal while you remained clean." Clivers' face changed just slightly. Horrocks stopped looking bored. Kramer's eyes narrowed to slits. Perry stood up too quickly. "That's insane!" "Then deny it," Wolfe said and leaned forward. "Deny the signatures. Deny the endorsements. Deny your possession of Scoville's notes. Deny—" Perry's hand went inside his coat. Everything after that was reflex. His gun came out and barked once. Wolfe jerked in his chair as the bullet tore into his upper left arm. Wolfe made a sound of outrage, as if Perry had spilled beer on the rug. I had my gun out and fired, catching Perry in the shoulder. He staggered, surprised, then tried to bring his gun around again. Kramer fired from my right. His shot drove through Perry's chest, and the thin, confident smile collapsed with him. He hit the floor hard and stayed there. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Skinner exhaled, like a man who has just watched a case wrap itself without his help. The British official looked ready to faint. Clivers stared at Perry's body with a strange, cold relief. Doc Vollmer came, patched Wolfe's arm, and left with complaints about citizens who invite bullets into private homes. Kramer and Skinner did their necessary paperwork, took statements, and finally departed, dragging the evening away with them. Clivers remained only long enough to hear Wolfe's final word on the old debt. "Pay it," Wolfe said. "Not to Miss Fox, she insists she wants nothing, but to the heirs of the men you and your companions used and discarded. Pay enough to keep your name out of headlines and your title out of court." Clivers argued, offered small sums, tried irritation, tried charm. Wolfe refused them all. 50,000, Wolfe said at last, calm as granite. "You may regard it as the purchase price of privacy." Clivers glared, then nodded once, as if signing with his pride. Horrocks muttered something slow and approving until Clivers snapped at him to shut up. When they were gone, the house seemed to breathe again. Wolfe sat back with his bandaged arm, took a careful sip of beer, and looked at me. "You are staring," he observed. "I'm admiring your technique," I said. "You sit still and get shot." "That is not technique," Wolfe replied. "It is irritation." He sighed once, deep and reluctant. "Your salary is raised $10 a week, beginning last Monday." I lifted my brows. 15. 10 is enough. 15, I said. He sighed again, a man conceding to weather. "Confound you, very well. 15. I picked up one of his red darts from the desk. For the first time in 2 days, the only sharp sound in the house was the small click of the point in my fingers, and not a gunshot in a telephone receiver.
Thank you for listening. What I love about this story is how it treats respectability as a kind of costume. At first, everything looks tidy. A corporation, an executive office, a discreet request, polite language designed to protect reputations. But the closer you look, the more you feel that the real issue isn't the missing money. It's the way powerful people try to control the narrative. They don't want truth. They want a result that keeps their world clean. And then the past arrives like a ghost with paperwork. The 40-year thread is brilliant because it shows how time doesn't erase wrongdoing. It only changes its packaging. A Yotho Og becomes a legend, a name becomes a title, and old violence gets replaced by modern influence. But the hunger underneath stays the same. Fear of exposure, fear of consequence, fear of losing status. I also enjoy the contrast between Wolfe and Archie. Archie moves, negotiates, handles pressure in real time. Wolfe barely moves at all, yet he controls the room by refusing to accept convenient phrasing. He insists on plain language, on motives, on who benefits. That's the heart of the Wolfe world, logic with moral weight. In the title, the 40-year debt lands perfectly because the debt isn't only money. It's accountability. It's what happens when a life is treated as a detail that can be forgotten. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Do you think people change over decades, or do they just get better at hiding? And finally, 10 unusual words and phrases from this story. Ornate. Highly decorated, fancy in a showy way. Marquis, a noble title ranking below a duke. Poker darts. Short darts used for a dartboard. Here thrown like spears. Confidentiality, keeping information secret, not shared publicly. Discreetly, quietly, without attracting attention. Phrasing, the specific way something is worded, often to sound better than it is. Serge suit, a suit made of sturdy twill fabric, often looks formal and old-fashioned. Tribunal, a small court-like group judging a situation. Retainer, an advance payment to hire a professional, lawyer or detective. Implicated, drawn into suspicion or involvement, even indirectly. Thank you very much. See you later.